Hi, Becky.
Hiya.
Hi. I'm very excited to be here with you, and we will like to hear about the Further Faster Network, what you guys have been up to doing in the UK and Ireland. And I will start with this question. Okay, is it really possible to do discipleship online? Is it really possible? Is there anything we can't do with discipleship online?
It's a great question. So I think about digital discipleship as inducting somebody and introducing somebody into a way of thinking and a way of behaving. And actually, if you think about it in that way, we do that in the digital space all the time. So by the way that we interact with ideas and people on social media and in the digital space, all the time, those things are building our understanding of the world, of ourselves, and of how we behave. And digital discipleship is about leveraging those spaces to help people to find and to follow Jesus and to model themselves after the character and of Jesus by using those spaces. So I absolutely believe digital discipleship is possible because we're always being transformed and we're always being informed by the digital space. But of course, there are going to be limitations to that, and we'll come along to that in a moment, I'm sure.
Okay, so basically what I'm understanding from what you're saying is that what we're about to see, we actually do it in some other areas of our lives. It's just that churches haven't been leveraging this kind of relationship online with people. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm about to go through is a journey that actually your audience might recognize that they've gone on with other ideas. And it's about us saying, okay, that's a journey that people are going on already. How could we actually take that journey to a better conclusion? How could we actually use that journey to help people to grow in their relationship with God and be disciples of Jesus?
Oh, okay, great. So I know you have a presentation, very kind of you. And just please, let's dive into it. We're really excited.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share it, Charlie. Just some context about where this comes from so that you can evaluate it accordingly. So a book that I read recently is by Nona Jones, who is the head of global faith partnerships at Facebook. And she wrote this book, From Social Media to Social Ministry. I don't know if it's available in other languages, but I will have to look that up. But it's a really fascinating read and a really helpful read in terms of shifting our thinking from thinking about social media as a space for promotion and as a space for getting people in the room and in our buildings physically as churches to thinking about social media as a place where we can be discipling and an authentic expression of ministry.
Okay.
Then my own experience joining a church in COVID. So I moved to a new area during the pandemic. And so I have never been to the church that I'm part of physically, but I've been able to build a relationship with that church and to connect into that church in the digital space. And actually, I was really surprised at how easy that was to do.
Oh, so that's been you actually experienced this.
Yeah, to an extent. So obviously, I'm not a unchurched person, so I come from a church background, so there are differences there. But in terms of connecting into the community and building relationships and feeling a sense of belonging to the church, that's actually been my experience in the pandemic. So that's been really surprising for me because I wouldn't have thought it would have been as easy as it was.
Okay.
And then I have tried as much as possible to base this on the discipleship model that I see in Jesus's ministry. And we can definitely talk a bit more about that and how I apply that in this space. And then observations, which I've just mentioned to you, Charlie, of how we develop allegiances in the digital space. So how we build relationships with ideas and with people in the digital space. I'm going to talk through 6 stages that we go through when we build a relationship with a brand or an idea in the digital space. And that stages that we go through that move us from no awareness to full allegiance to an idea or to a person. And as I go through this, you'll start to see some similarities and some possible ways that we can leverage this for churches. Okay. So firstly, the journey that we go on with ideas and brands and personalities online. So it starts with an appeal. So we see something that intrigues us. We see a social media post or a video or a tweet that makes us, it stands out to us and it makes us think, and we're intrigued by it. So then we go on this second phase, which is a journey of exploration. And often this is characterized by what I don't know if the language is the same, but in the UK, we call this going on a binge. So where we go back through all of the content and we suddenly find ourselves watching YouTube video after YouTube video, or going back through the whole social media profile of somebody.
We call that stalking.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe that says more about me than it does about others, but we've all been there, right? So we've all been there. And then we enter into what I would call the relationship phase. And this is characterized by a motivation to be noticed. So once we start enjoying somebody's content, we start to comment and interact in the hope that they might notice us, because we start to feel a sense of familiarity with them. If you think about a YouTuber or somebody you follow on social media, even if you don't know them personally, you start to feel familiar with them. But as we know, that relationship is quite one-sided, and we'll come on to that in a moment as to how we can actually shift that balance. Then, if we're going to continue a journey with a brand or an idea or a personality online, we have to experience change. We have to notice that something is different because we're following them, because if it's not making a difference to us, it's not relevant to us, and therefore we will not persist in that journey with them. So we have to go through a process of change. If we do that, then we come to the stage of identification. So identification is, I'm now aligning myself with this tribe. I consider myself to be a fan. I would say, I might put on my profile that it's something that I like or something that I follow. And that also leads us into an invitation phase. So we start to tell others about this idea or this brand or this personality that we've come across. So the question that I'm asking is, well, can we leverage that journey towards a more satisfying conclusion? Because actually that journey can take us in some quite unhealthy directions as well. We might follow somebody who actually puts ideas in our heads that aren't constructive and aren't good for our lives and aren't good for our relationship with God or our relationship with others. But could we actually leverage this journey that happens anyway to a more satisfying conclusion, the best conclusion that there is, which is that somebody is finding and following Jesus? So that's where I've restructured this journey, because actually it's not a linear pathway. It's something that we don't graduate from each stage. All of these things are happening all the time in order to bring us into this relationship, disciple us into a relationship with an idea or a brand or a personality. And if we want to leverage this journey for churches, all of these things need to be building on the other. And the question I'm asking is, well, could this journey help people to find and follow Jesus in the digital space? And just a note on that, it's not a prescriptive discipleship pathway. So we all in our churches might have a journey that we want to take people on in order to further them in their faith. And we might sort of prescribe, we might say, okay, next you need to do this, next you need to do this. What we're actually talking about is a natural journey that people go on. So they're kind of wanting to move into that phase, and then we give them the ability to do that. And how do we actually make that natural journey a good one?
If I may ask a question, this is very interesting because while I was getting ready to talk to you, I kind of noticed that, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, this is a natural, this is happening right now, whether churches wants to use it or not, whether churches wants to leverage on it or not, this is happening. I have a 12-year-old and I notice how I can say, oh, that YouTuber, my kid is in a relationship mode right now with that YouTuber. That show, my youngest daughter, she likes that. So what you're proposing here, or what I would like our leaders to understand, is that churches can actually join, to kind of speak this kind of journey and use it for their to reach unchurched people in their own communities.
Absolutely.
Now, what do you mean with prescriptive discipleship pathway? This is not like a cooking recipe. Is that what you mean, or what would you mean with that
Yeah.
moved?
So by that, I mean that we as churches with great intentions might put in a certain model that we want to take people through. It's a really positive thing. We've all got systems and strategies that, okay, first somebody does this, then the next step is this, then they do this. And we're always kind of funneling people down that route. This one in the digital, they're kind of, really what I mean is that it's a self-led journey. So it's not necessarily led by the church, it's resourced by the church, but it's actually a journey that someone is self-motivating themselves and self-leading themselves along. Definitely there are parts of this journey where we want to bring other people alongside that. And that's where the relationship phase looks different in the church space, that we want to actually get somebody along to help them go on that journey. But it's not like the church is up here trying to pull somebody along their plan. It's actually, we're facilitating that person to go on that journey almost by themselves, but then we bring other people along to support them as well.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, just to kind of to explain it, it's not like a set of classes where people go, okay, you do Bible 101, then Bible 102.
Yes.
But actually, we give options to people, and they're creating their own pathway as they go. Kind of like when you go to Netflix, I choose my own list of movies that I want to see.
Yes.
Netflix will learn from what I like, and then probably propose me other movies in that direction. But Netflix won't oblige me to actually see a certain movie just because Netflix wants me to see.
Yeah.
So that's how I understand it, and it's really interesting because in church we're used to actually tell people this is the set of knowledge that you need to go through. This is the set of experiences, but life is not like that. I mean, that happens in education and university and college.
Yes.
But during life, you're choosing your way as you go. So it's kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
Proposing.
And really, I love what you've just said. And really, there should be an arrow that goes from the top and takes you back round to the bottom, because it's exactly that you don't get to the invite phase and then you've graduated. It's about constantly bringing people back round through that journey, whatever stage of faith they're at. Because as you say, discipleship is not like that. You don't graduate and you've got it all and you know it all and you can do it all. We're constantly learning and growing and seeking after more. And so we want to be able to bring somebody back through that journey again.
One of the things that we're currently talking with our leaders is the fact that a spiritual formation is a long life journey. It's not something that happens in 2 years, 3 years. I mean, your spiritual formation, your discipleship just keeps going. It changes throughout the phases of your life and your context, but we're always growing. Doesn't matter if I'm already baptized or if I'm a church person or an unchurched person, or whether I'm 80 or 40 or 25. I'm always in that process of sanctification, as Paul calls it. So I really like the way you're putting it, because I can be in my invite part in certain areas of my life, but I might be in a relationship part in another areas of my life. So it's kind of makes a lot of sense to the reality that we go day to day.
Yeah, and really that exploration section, it should be available to everybody, because we want to take people beyond a Sunday, I go to church on a Sunday relationship with God, to kind of whole life discipleship. And so enabling them to constantly explore more of the Bible, more of Jesus's teaching, more of what it looks like to live out their faith. You never get past that. So.
Okay, so you have a little bit of explanation for each one of the steps.
Yeah, so what I've tried to do is at each stage give a clarifying question for churches, because it may look different in different contexts, but if I can give you a clarifying question, hopefully that helps churches to think, okay, what would this actually look like in practice? So for the appeal phase, the clarifying question would be, would people find relevant content from us, which would not only stop the scroll, stop them from just, whirring through their social media page, but inspires them for more. So it actually makes them want to go on that journey of exploration. And just a note that our message and our teaching is the building block on which digital discipleship rests. So being able to get a relevant message out to people we have to have that first stage. Otherwise, we're never going to take people through the rest of that journey for the first time.
Okay.
Then the exploration phase. So the clarifying question, if someone went on a binge or stalk, if you like, of your church content, what would you hope they would discover? So what would churches want people to discover if they went through your content? And then what would drive their curiosity forward rather than kind of put them off or bring that journey to a close? Because we want to help people. Sorry
to interrupt. So basically this is mainly thinking about somebody who's outside the church, for a church person. If whatever content we're posting, whatever the teaching we're talking about, would it appeal people? Would it foster their imagination to look for more, or their curiosity forward? But that's a big question, because most of the time when we're teaching, most people are talking about the insiders. So what you're saying is that our digital, what we post, what we and probably you're going to explain this later. We need to have them not only present for our teaching when we're in the live presentation, but only in our digital expression.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can talk a bit more about this later, but I would say that that's about thinking through who is dominating each space. So when it comes to the physical spaces in your church, physical small groups, physical Sundays, even Sundays and small groups that have unchurched people in mind, it will be church people and Christians who dominate that space. But the digital space, because it's open to everyone, is dominated by unchurched people or people who are not part of your church. So to leverage that journey for people who are doing it for the first time and to have them in mind is really key, because it's the digital space where the unchurched people dominate, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So the relationship phase, the clarifying question, and this is where it really shifts away from what the journey we go on with brands and personalities, because that's a one-sided relationship, really. How does someone get on a level playing field with you so that they can ask their questions, pose their challenges, and get real? Because discipleship is at its essence, see how I do it, and come and do likewise. So we want to help people go on that journey with others. So how are we making the digital space personal? I guess it would be another way of thinking about that question.
And how does the church or the people in the church make themselves available to these people when they're trying to reach us?
So there are all sorts of different ways that I've seen churches do this. Some really effective ones are things like having digital hosts or online pastors. So people who are often seen on the video content, who are talking at the beginning of a live stream and saying, look, you can reach out to me personally. This is my email address. I'd love to connect with you. So that's one really good way of introducing that kind of level playing field. Using Facebook groups and Zoom. I've found Zoom short-term courses and things like that really invaluable for allowing people to kind of get on a level playing field. And the book I referenced earlier, Nona Jones, From Social Media to Social Ministry, she talks a lot about Facebook groups as the space where people can do this. So yes, contexts where you're actually helping people to connect on a smaller group or one-to-one basis in the digital space, but there are all sorts of different ways. And
also something as basic as, liking and answering every comment that you get,
Yes.
Just like you said, people, they want to be seen. When people reach this phase in the pathway, in the journey, with our relationship with our churches, they will start commenting, and if we don't answer, it's basically we're not noticing them. So if we don't,
absolutely.
and that's what they are actually looking for.
Yeah. 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 And encouraging, sorry.
Go ahead.
Encouraging people to do things like sending a direct message to your page rather than just commenting as well, so that you can actually connect with them personally. So whether you've posted something and you're looking for a response, how about thinking about, can we get people to send a direct message in response to this rather than just commenting, because that's even more personal.
Mm-hmm. Because basically the first two stages, they are anonymous.
Yes.
Right now, when we start a relationship phase is when they actually get out of the let's call it darkness, and now we can see them, we can notice them, and we can actually begin some kind of relationship. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. Cool. So then the change phase. Now, obviously, we can't force or demand change. We can't always make change happen, but we can enable people to access environments where that's the most natural next step. So the clarifying question there is, how do we help people embrace, identify, and celebrate change? Because we want people to notice that things are making a difference to them.
Okay. So, for example, that's when we propose, you're talking about steps, you're talking about practical teaching, the questions, or when you talk about how, you say, clarifying question, how do we help people embrace, identify, and celebrate change? But my question will be, what kind of things can we do to help them embrace, identify, and celebrate? What can churches or what have you heard that churches have been doing to help in this phase?
Yeah. So practical teaching is, it almost has to be in place for this to be happening. But I think it's the next step of helping people to actually identify it and pause and see the change that's happened. So one of the great ways that I think I've seen churches do this is story videos. So couple of minutes interview with somebody who's been through a course or done something different off the back of a teaching series. So they've changed the way they use their money, or their relationship has been transformed in some way by something that they've gone through as part of the church community. So capturing that in a story video and celebrating that as often as we can, even small stories of change, help other people to then acknowledge that in their own lives and to celebrate it and to embrace it in their own lives. And then,
sorry, I like that. I mean, that's when you see testimonials in web pages, and you hear other people's stories or how they have been affected and their life has been changed by what they're seeing, and you actually identify with their story, because people connect with other people. So that's very interesting. It doesn't have to be this huge testimony but small changes can actually make an impact on other people's lives. I like that.
Yes. Yeah. Great. And then identification. So eventually we want to cross over from being an outside observer to identifying as part of the thing, and to say that we're in. So the clarifying question there is, how do we help people move from observing and exploring to owning, belonging, and committing? And that might not happen all at once, but we're gradually trying to move people into that stage of no longer being an outside observer, but being an active participant.
Okay. That's when you actually identify yourself as maybe not a completely believer, but you identify yourself with certain values that you see around as part of a tribe.
Exactly. Exactly that. And it might even come just through identification with a small group of people in the church, or with maybe a team that they've got involved in, or even just with an event that they were part of. It might be that the moment where they say, hey, I went and served at church on Sunday, or they take a picture of themselves, at a volunteer event or at a social action event or something. It's like you said earlier, it's moving out of the kind of anonymous shadows and even more publicly saying, I'm part of this thing now.
Yeah, and I like, for example, serving, given options, different options of for people to serve. with
Yes.
different kind of commitments, because doesn't have to be like a long-term commitment, but just to be able to serve, whether it's a church or an activity that is being led by the church outside the church, can be option for people to start identifying as being part of that tribe.
Yes, totally. And that kind of leads into the invitation. And the clarifying question there is, well, how do we make it as easy as possible for someone to bring a friend along on this journey, and as likely as possible that we will? So the distinction there is, we might have really simple steps. So, oh, you can just share a link, but are we making it as likely as possible that someone will? So are we readapting content, sort of 3-minute segments from a Sunday preach, so that it's really easy and likely that someone will share it, things like that. But constantly thinking all the time, are we helping other people? Are we enabling and equipping, which we might come on to in a minute, others to bring people into this journey too?
Yeah, that will be like the final phase. And like you said, it's not a course or something you graduate from. It's we will be we'll be jumping from one phase to another in different stages of our life, or different topics. Yeah.
So in this last slide, and then I'll finish up, I've just tried to map out, okay, practically speaking, what is kind of the why, the what, and the how of this, so that churches can start to think about this more tangibly. So those phases become kind of the why. At each stage, this is why we're doing what we're doing. The what is clarifying like what it is that we're trying to create in those spaces. So the first is engaging and relevant on-message content, which kind of comes under the umbrella of, are we giving people material that they can consider? And are we giving people stuff to actually get their teeth into and to think through? Then spaces of mutuality, so where they can actually get on a level playing field with somebody. And then opportunities for ownership, commitment, and belonging. And then I've blocked out a few hows of actually where this might look like. So setting up your YouTube content and your Instagram, Facebook, website platforms in ways that enable journeys of exploration. Thinking about digital groups and continuing digital groups even after they're not necessary. So even beyond the pandemic, they're still a great first step for people who don't want to come out of the anonymous space. And personal relationships, so having personal hosts and personal greeters and guest services, digital teams and things like that. And then digital and physical celebrations and serving, which are great opportunities for people to come out into the open and come into that identification space.
So now that I see it this way that you're showing it, it looks like 3 big steps, like unknown, where the person is exploring and we're trying to appeal, the appeal part. Then they're known, or they come out of the anonymous part, and then we have a relationship, we grow on a relationship with them, and we know them by name. Yes. You may say. So probably between exploration and relationship, we might start getting their name, their emails, and it's very important to actually let them know that we know them, because I remember an example. There's this, I like history and politics and all that, and there's this YouTube page, and I never comment, and for some reason I just wanted to comment on a certain video, and they answered me. So that was a big deal. It sounds very simple, but at the end, like you say, it went from appeal, exploration, and now for some reason I just felt the need to comment, because I felt that there was some kind of relationship. So I think that's a big deal, and that helps people with what they do. So eventually we began this conversation by asking, is it possible to do it only online? And I noticed here that you put that in the identification part and invite part, phase, physical. So eventually we do want people to join physically to the building, to the community, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and because eventually I believe that people still want to do that, but I think they're starting to want to do it a bit later in the journey. So if you just think about any space that we want to go to physically, we always visit digitally first. So if I'm going to go to a restaurant or go away somewhere, I'm always going to go there online before I go there in person. And actually, even more so when it comes to developing a understanding of ideas and a different worldview. So if you're introducing somebody to Christianity for the first time, we can take somebody on that journey for a long time in the digital space. And actually, it's a really great place for them to do that journey. But especially when it comes to relationships, people want to get out of the digital space and get together physically. So like Carrie Newhoff always says, there's online dating, but there's no online marriage. Like eventually people want to actually meet up in person. And actually that becomes, rather than this really scary thing that they're doing for the first time, it becomes a natural progression from all these connections and these relationships that they've built in the digital space. And it becomes an exciting thing to come out of that space and go into the physical space. That's kind of my ideal. That's my dream in terms of how we can model this out.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Let me ask a question. Would you say that because you mentioned something very important? Once at the beginning you said invited identification. Probably the majority will be insiders, church people, but in the exploration and appeal, the majority will be outsiders.
Yeah.
Do you think we should and so even though we're using the content that we use on Sunday and that we are creating to put it on YouTube and Instagram and all that, we have to be really careful on our language and our delivery in our teaching, because at the end, even though we are showing it on Sunday, but it's going to be used on our different social media channels. So I think it's very important to sign that, to show it, because sometimes we as leaders are not as careful by the wording or the examples or what we're trying to do, and we make it hard for editors or graphic designers to actually what can I get from that message to use?
Yeah. Yes.
But if we think through as teachers when we get ready for a message, that what we're going to do is actually going to be used to reach unchurched people, it will actually make it easier for you, for people
totally.
that do your job, and actually for people to grow in this ladder and phases. So I thought I was going to ask a question, but it ended being a comment.
No, it's all really helpful.
Yes. So thank you very much. We have a small ebook that you guys created for this in the Further Faster Network. So like we said, like we were talking before the recording, we're going to translate it and hopefully give it out to the people. So Becky, thank you very much for your help. It's been very insightful.
My pleasure.
And we'll probably be talking a little bit more in the future. Have a good day.
Great, Angie. Thanks so much for having me.